Hello, Dan.
This is guys, Guru Nation. Monica did this. Like I think it's so amazing when she was showing it to me. First of all, she did it for her book. Link is underneath this video. Let's just start with that. She's got a book on consenting and on screening. Link
This,
underneath. It's really good. I have it. She teaches this in the CRC Academy. Let's just get our shameless plugs out of the way too. So her book, CRC Academy. This is covered in great detail. But here it is for you guys as well. Let's go, Monica.
yeah, so this is about the screening process, the whole screening process in detail. So in the book, I describe every single step, but I also created the flow chart, so it makes it easier. And in the book is also in detail the steps or like a checklist for the informed consent process. So here it takes you from the screening, what you need to do. The very first step is just like very detailed. So site to schedule the screening visit with the subject. Then the first assessment in the screening visit is this ICF, obviously the informed consent form. And in the book, I describe the importance of that. Make sure you are using the most updated IRB approved ICF.
This part alone kills so many coordinators' dreams because this is like a huge mistake. I tell Katie's in the CRC Academy. I tell Katie every chance I get, Katie, even when we have a new screening and even when I know we're using the right form, I ask her, Katie, how do we know this is the right form? And then she goes to that. She gets worried and goes to the IRB portal. And then she says, no, it is the right form.
The
I say,
most
okay, good,
updated. Yeah.
good. Just checking. And then I tell her this is very
Yes.
important. I'm making sure because I've made this mistake so many times as a younger CRC that it's super important. It's a major deviation too.
Yeah, me too. That's why I decided to write this book. Thinking
It's
about
such an
my
amazing, it's
yeah.
a really good, important book.
Okay, so include as part of the ICF the patient records release authorization form or any other document required on your state. So, for example, in California, we are required to add the California Bill of Rights. So make sure you read or find out if in your state you need to add extra documents. Do you have to add anything in Arizona, Dan?
No, it's only the very high regulated states. California, I think New York, the typical ones.
Okay, so so have all these documents print out beforehand and also ensure to follow GCPs. And very important also to follow your site SOPs for the ICF process, because if you do something different than what it is described in your SOPs or you miss something, let's say, for example, in the ICF process, for sure we need the signature of the patient, the signature of the person carrying out the ICF process, and then the HIPAA, right? That's for
Yeah.
sure. But then let's say,
And that's your standard operating procedures, guys.
exactly, let's say in your standard operated procedures, it says that the patient needs to initial every page. And then if you never did it because you never read your SOPs, and the sponsor comes and do an audit or the FDI comes and do an audit, that's going to be a big finding. You
Yeah.
didn't even follow your own SOPs.
Perfect example is like, and you teach this in the CRC Academy all the time, but my SOP, and I have to change it for this reason, I just haven't yet. I think I will before we start our next studies because we have 2 studies starting and we don't want to do this if we don't have to. But our SOP says every page of the informed consent needs to be initial and dated. But sometimes the studies we get, our IRB doesn't require that. But we still have to do it because it's in our SOPs. So I'm going to take that out. So sometimes a new coordinator will say, well, it's not like Katie brought this up. Well, they don't have to. And I said, no, but on our SOPs, we put it, so we have to do it. And
Yeah.
then she said, okay, I understand. So a lot of people make that mistake also.
So you need to make sure your staff and yourself, or if you are a CRC or if you
Yeah.
are a monitor, to review that in the SOPs.
Yep.
So did the subject agree to participate in the study? So then you have the two options. If the patient decide not to participate, you can always keep it in the database for following studies. So add them to the site database. Obviously, if the patient agrees, and tell them that you can keep them up to date with the following studies. Maybe they will be interested in something else in the future, or a different study for the same condition, right?
Hmm.
Then if the subject says yes, then you have to give them a copy. After the ICF is signed and executed, then you have to give them a copy of the ICF.
Yeah.
There are two options, and actually I read that yesterday, but I'm not entirely sure. So some areas, some regulatory places says some IRBs said that you have to give the patient the signed in form of consent, a copy of the signed in form of consent, and another one says like a template,
Yeah.
like a copy. So
We always give them their signed one. And sometimes we even email it to them because we use eSource.
yeah,
So uh, we scan because we haven't switched to e-consent yet. We scan our ICF into the
the
eSource,
platform, yeah,
and then it's easy to email it to the patient too. Most of the time, the patient wants it emailed to them, so then we email
yeah.
it.
And I mean, either or, make sure you read the SOPs because probably it says there if you're gonna give the patient the sign or the just the
Yeah.
template.
Yep.
And a disclaimer, please keep in mind that this is only serve as a guidance, okay?
Yes.
This could have variations depending on the protocol, the site SOPs, or in
Ask
the
your
future
monitor,
the
guys.
rules
If you're
can
in doubt,
change.
ask your
Yeah,
monitor. Ask your
yeah,
monitor. We are not
always.
your monitor. Monica's not your monitor.
Okay, so let's go to the next part of this flow chart. So after you give the patient or the subject the inform of consent, then review the schedule of events and continue with the visit. Ensure to complete. You have to go to the protocol and review the schedule of events, what continues in that visit, right? So you need to make sure everything is ready. Obviously, if you're doing a screening, if you're starting a screening that potentially could continue, you have to be ready before, right? With all the documents, with the laboratories, everything that you're gonna be doing in that specific part. Oftentimes, you're gonna be able to split the visit in different parts, just because the screening visit can be sometimes long, or because you were expecting, you were not sure if the patient was going to participate or not, so you just schedule just a little bit of that visit and then continue with the rest. But you have to ask the sponsor first, the monitor, because remember that we have in the protocol the inclusion and exclusion criteria, and they probably will want you to do first the assessments or the procedures that could be exclusionary. So let's say, so then you're going to be reviewing the scheduled events and continue with the visit. Ensure to complete all the assessments as soon as possible, because remember that all procedures, including the test results, this is very important. All the procedures, including the test results, should be completed and obtained within the window visit, for the
Yeah.
screening window visit.
And I
So
want to
if the
add, like, this
Mhm.
is like a general flow chart. If you This is good to learn the concepts. Um, you should actually do this for every study you have. Katie, I want Katie next time you see Katie in class, Monica, CRC, ask her, tell her Dan told me you made an awesome cheat sheet for one of your studies. And can you share it with us just so we can see the details of how detailed this is? Because
Oh, that's
the
nice.
sponsor gave us a cheat sheet, but she made it even more detailed because we were kept making mistakes certain places.
Mm.
So she has a really good one, and ask her next time she's on.
Okay. Yeah, because every study has so many details in a specific area. Like for example, let's say in visit 5, you have to complete certain thing before the patient goes to the next visit. So
Mhm.
you need to make sure to read the protocol obviously back to back. I mean front to back. Okay. Register the subject in the IWRS or IRT, which is the new platform, which is exactly the same as IRB, it's just a more fancy name.
Yeah.
To get their ID and the subject ID. This is something that must be done in the same day that you do the ICF. Okay. No, if you split the visit, it cannot be done after. It has to be the same day that you did the ICF. Print the source documents and document every single part, every single process. Be mindful of Alcoa-C. We teach the Alcoa-C in class, in
Mhm.
the CRC. Note the in research, if it's not documented, it did not happen.
That's
Okay.
right.
Review inclusion and exclusion criteria. Obviously, this is going to be done with the principal investigator because the principal investigator at the end of the day decides if the patient goes or not in the study, right? The inclusion exclusion criteria, review the list of prohibited medications, review the concomitant medications, review the subject medical records, and you should have reviewed the inclusion exclusion criteria that don't include laboratories or other tests that require more time to get results. Check the pre-screening um, shelf flow, the concomitant meds, and medical records. All of that you have to review, okay, before you actually continue with the screening. Because oftentimes, let's say the inclusion has a requirement that the patient is taking a specific drug with a specific dose, or let's say some drugs are exclusionary if the patient is taking that. Remember, oftentimes, if the
Yeah.
patient is taking in the prohibit list, sometimes they have obviously this the list of all the drugs, but sometimes it also has the washout period. So if you know that it has a washout period and the patient is taking it, then maybe analyze things better, right? And see how can everything works. And obviously the principal investigator needs to
Always.
determine
And
if
again,
it's
Katie is really good at this for a new coordinator. And then we have a nurse practitioner at our site, Jaime Valles, who does this really well. But you can too, and it requires just a little bit of understanding of medication in your therapeutic area, and that's
yeah.
what the internet's for. You can learn. The information's out there. You just gotta know. If
Mm-hmm.
you're looking at a patient's med records, I do this every day, and I've been doing this 17 years. If you see a med and you can't remember, if it's part of a certain class of drugs that the protocol says excluded or washout, look it up and see. And then if you still
Yeah.
have question, ask your PI or your medical monitor,
Mm-hmm.
or your CRA.
Yeah. Okay, so then after reviewing all that, medical history, prohibited medications, inclusion, exclusion, all of that, is the subject taking a prohibited drug or treatment? Then, like I was saying, review the washout period, inform the subject about the decision, and document this, and obviously document every single part. Okay, so in the case the principal investigator considers is on the patient benefit to continue to do the washout and continue the study, then we have to document it when the patient is stop and when is going to be the next part, right?
Hmm.
Um, and then, okay, so in the case the patient is taking a prohibited medication that it doesn't have a washout, and I mean, the patient has to continue taking it, then in that case, the patient is going to be a screen failure, unfortunately. And then, okay, so then if the patient is not taking any prohibited medication, then continue with the visit and all the assessments per protocol. Check all the details of the washout period and proceed accordingly in the case, like I say, if the patient has to go through the washout period. And let me go to the next part. Okay, and then schedule the staff. This is something that you have to do also beforehand. Schedule the staff members that are involved for the screening procedures. Make sure everybody is available for that. Schedule any procedure that involves a test, like imaging or biopsy, and be mindful again of the window period and the length of the results. Because let's say if it's a biopsy, and it's known that the biopsy is the results are gonna take to get the results, let's say 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and then the window period for that screening visit is, let's say, 35 days. You need to schedule that basically the first week, as soon as the patient starts the screening. Make sure the PI review every document and every result. So that means laboratories, imaging, biopsies, whatever. Okay. Enter all the data as you've been getting it in the EDC. Make a copy of the EKG if it's involved in the screening visit, because the EKGs fade out. So the only proof that you have really is gonna be the copy.
Mhm.
After gathering all the information required and receiving all the results, schedule the PI to review the inclusion-exclusion criteria. On the worst, one of the worst, if not the worst deviation, as I can commit, is randomizing or doing the baseline to a visit to a patient that should not be randomized. Okay, so keep that
Yeah.
in mind. The screening visit is case
Super important.
sensitive. The screening visit is case sensitive, so it has to be reviewed over and over again. The inclusion exclusion criteria to make sure, review the medical records and everything back and forward, so that way you don't find inconsistencies and everything is,
Yeah.
well,
And make sure
sometimes.
also make sure everything's yesterday actually I talked with Katie about this. We screened someone yesterday, so that's why this is like perfect time to do this video. But um one of the patients that we screened previously, the lab made an issue with their urine as it wasn't enough, so they were able to do 2 of the 3 urine. They did the drug screen and the urine chemistry, but they didn't do the urinalysis. So we had to redo the urinalysis, but if we didn't redo it accidentally, right, we would have randomized the patient without having everything done. So it's helpful to do the EDC quickly, because the EDC will also let you know if you're missing something. And if you go to the EDC and they ask for your analysis, and you say, "Oh shoot, we forgot to do it," you're not going to randomize on accident. So it's an added benefit of entering data quickly.
Yeah, because it's gonna give you a query, for example, if the patient is taking a prohibited drug,
That too. Yeah.
or if the patient has a prohibit condition. I mean,
Yeah.
not prohibit, an exclusionary condition.
Yep.
So it's very important. That's why it's important to review inclusion and exclusion criteria in detail and check this with all the documents that you have from the patient. Then did the subject qualify? If after getting all the results on this, if the subject qualified, then schedule the randomization. But if the subject did not qualify, then register the screen failure in the IWRS or IRT, also in the EDC, and then inform the subject about the results and tell him or her that you will have another studies in the future, and that the patient might qualify. So you're going to be adding the patients or the subject to the database and keep them informed. So never miss or never lose any information of patients, because if they don't qualify for one, they might qualify in the future for another one. So that's basically all of it. I put a note about what is IWRS, Aqua-C, the EDC, and the things that I mentioned on the it's like a glossary for the
Yeah, no, that's
acronyms.
awesome. So again,
Yeah.
it's in Monica's book. The link is underneath the show notes, or the link's underneath the video. And then the CRC Academy, this is like you guys get like a free class, like a free mini class from CRC Academy. So if you're interested in both of those, they're both underneath this video with links. Thank you, Monica.
Thank you.
And
The next class, the
ah,
registration is open. If anybody wants to get registered for the October, end of October class.
and if you're watching this in the future, there's probably a class starting soon.
Oh,
So
yeah.
reach out to me. Reach out to me and I put you in touch with Monica. Thank
Yeah.
you guys. Bye bye.
Bye.